Welcome back to the Rob Skinner podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no regrets life, to make this life count, and to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Today on my program, I'm so happy to have Dr. Al Baird from Phoenix, Arizona. And Al's been an elder for many, many years, has been part of the Boston church, part of the Boston movement. I was in the Los Angeles church for many years, and has seen the development of the ICOC from its very inception. And I look forward to talking to him about that, as well as about the recent loss of his wife, Gloria, and other topics. But before we get into this week's episode, I want to let you know about the mission planting to Flagstaff, Arizona. The churches in Arizona are working together to plant a church in Flagstaff in the summer of 2021. I've been asked to form the team and to train its leader. There are already a group of 12 disciples living in Flagstaff right now, and my goal is to form a team of at least 15 to 20 more disciples to double that mission outpost. As I mentioned before, Flagstaff is a beautiful city. About 140,000 people in the metropolitan area. It's at 7,000 feet elevation. It's forested. It's near the Grand Canyon. There's skiing, hiking. If you're an outdoors person, it is like Shangri-La. And so I'm looking for people who are willing to move there. Short, long-term missionaries, summer missionaries, families, people that want to take their family to a beautiful location. One of the benefits of COVID is the rise of remote work. And so if you've been thinking about, hey, I'd love to live in a beautiful location and work, this would be an incredible opportunity for you and your family to go to make a difference spiritually, as well as just have a great lifestyle for your family. I'm also looking to hire a couple to lead the planting, and that couple would first move to Tucson for personal training with Pam and me. And so I'm looking for a young couple, married or dating or engaged, who've graduated from college. Don't have to have previous church leadership experience, and Pam and I will work with you and prepare you to lead a planting with solid growth. So we are looking forward to it this next summer. We're going to be up there for 3 months, 1 to 3 months, Pam and I, to help build the team, to build a sense of family, build a sense of unity, and then there'll be a big kickoff with all the churches in Arizona in September. So if you're interested in being a part of an exciting mission team, leading the team, or if you know of someone who might be a good candidate to go on the team, please contact me. You can go to robskinner.com, or you can email me at rob@tucsonchurchofchrist.org, or contact me through Facebook. This is an awesome way, a direct way to make this life count and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Back to the program. Al, great to have you on the program today.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
It's amazing. We don't live that far apart, but it's a real blessing to have you here in Arizona, the experience that you've acquired over the years, and to be able to have you share on the program today. It's amazing. This program is geared towards people that want to grow, make a difference, and certainly you and your wife, Gloria, have over the years. Can you tell me a little bit about how you became a Christian?
How much time do you have? So that was in phases. I was a baby during World War II, and my dad was overseas for like 4 years. So just my mom and me, and she became during that time a member of the Church of Christ. So I grew up going to the Church of Christ with her, and I was baptized in Church of Christ, but I became a member of the Church of Christ. I didn't really become a disciple, a baptized disciple, until many years later. But that again is a pretty long story. I was actually a part of the Boston church. In fact, I was an elder in the Boston church. And someone had asked me, Al, how did you become a Christian? And no, they said, when did you become a Christian? And of course, I mean, everybody remembers the date they were baptized, but I couldn't. So I start thinking that, okay, what happened? And by then I was actually 47 years old in Boston, and so I went back and said, okay, I need to remember what happened. And so I remember I was in church one Sunday, and the preacher before church came by and said, Al, how old are you now? And I said, 15. He said, don't you think it's about time you were baptized? And so I said, well, I thought, well, he's the preacher. He must know. I mean, I knew the basics. I knew that baptism was forgiveness of sins and things like that. And so I started thinking about, this is all recollection when I was 47. Then I said, okay, I need to get baptized. I remembered that it was like 2 weeks till Easter Sunday. And I thought, well, yeah, that would be a great time to get baptized because Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And it'd be my resurrection, my new birth. And so I was baptized on Easter Sunday when I was 15. And so what I did when I was 47, and someone asked me when I was baptized, I went back to the Farmer's Almanac at that year. When was Easter? And that's how I remembered when I was baptized.
Oh my gosh.
So then I got to think and said, you know what, there's something wrong with this picture.
Right.
So I got to think about my life at that time. And I could not remember a single thing that I repented of when I was baptized. And the more I got thinking about it, I said, you know what, this is not at all the way we teach the Bible to people now.
Wow.
And so actually then I basically reconsidered everything and was baptized when I was 47 years old.
Wow.
April 7th, 1987. So it was a long journey, and but it was one that again it's in thinking about it. Of course, the early days in Boston, I mean, there was no difference in the mainline church and what we were basically a part of the mainline church, and so people just placed membership from the mainline church. But after that, we really started carrying the cost with everybody that came apart, because we realized that a lot of people were like me and had never really studied the Bible. And although there were a number of people that really had become true disciples, there were also many like me that didn't and really reconsidered their conversion and realized that it was not really what we would teach and what we think the Bible teaches to us to do. So it was a long story.
Wow.
But
it takes a lot of
long journey.
It takes a lot of humility to do that at 47 and as an elder. That must have taken a lot of guts on your part.
Well, that was another thing too. Actually, Gloria being more spiritual than me, she was actually baptized 6 months earlier because she'd gone through a similar type journey, but she was baptized in the mainline church when she was 11. And so she came to her own conviction that she hadn't become a true disciple then. And so she was baptized 6 months earlier than me. But what happened, though, by that time, that was in 1986, people respected Gloria so much in the church that when she was baptized, there was suddenly a wave of people saying, hey, I need to get baptized. If she needs to get baptized, I need to get baptized.
Right.
And so there was a whole wave of people who had been baptized in Boston Church, truly repenting and whatever, that we just finally had to say, hey, stop it. Your baptism was great, whatever.
Right.
And so when I went through mine, we said, we're not going to do this again. We're not even going to tell people
do
in
it
general
private. Right.
that I'm doing this because we want another wave of people questioning their conversions.
Exactly, and causing insecurity in their salvation. Okay, so how did you meet Gloria? You guys are both from Texas, I understand.
I had a football scholarship to Abilene Christian University, or at that time, Abilene Christian College. And Gloria was there. Her dad actually was a language. In fact, he was head of the foreign language department there.
Wow.
And we met while we were there and fell in love. And that
So,
was
so you were like a football
second
star.
best thing in our life. I played football there. I wouldn't say I was a star.
What was your position?
I was but back in those days, I was an end. There was no such thing as wide receiver or whatever. It was just an end
I see.
because everything was basic T formation.
Got it. Got it.
So, and you played both ways. You played defense and offense.
That's great. Okay. Well, what was it that stood out to you about Gloria? I mean, what attracted you to her?
Oh my, you don't have enough time. I mean, just everything I had on my wish list and beyond.
Mm.
And the main thing was her spirituality and also her family. I think her mom and dad were totally unique people. They had were totally committed Christians, as committed as anybody I've ever known. And they actually, in addition to being head of the foreign language department, they also were missionaries in Mexico. He had a weekly broadcast, and they'd go every summer to Mexico and study with the people that they had contacted and baptized them and whatever. And so they started a lot of churches in Mexico and whatever, and actually helped us when we started planting in Mexico City. He actually helped us in contacts there and so forth. And in fact, he had he had put together a songbook in Spanish that we used for years in Mexico.
Wow.
But anyway, when I started dating Gloria and being around her mom and dad and seeing their love for each other, and they were just totally romantic and whatever. And I said, that's what I want, because my mom and dad weren't like that at all. And so the example that they set, and knowing that and seeing that Gloria had been raised that way, but also, I mean, she was just my best friend.
Wow.
And we dated for, I guess, a year and a half, and it was just once we got going, it was just love all the way.
That's great. Now, there's a lot of people that are listening that are looking for the right partner and kind of going, haven't seen it yet, having some challenges, having faith that they're going to find that right person. Any advice that you'd give to them?
Well, other than obviously looking for someone who loves God more than they love you, I think probably the second best thing is you need to find somebody who will truly be your very best friend. Not a good friend, not a best friend, but your very best friend. And that was, I think, probably the thing in our marriage that made our marriage so great was, first of all, the total focus on spirituality and pleasing God, but secondly, we just loved being together. We were just truly best friends.
Right.
And to me, those are two very basic ingredients in having a good marriage.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tell me, how did you guys end up in Boston? I mean, you still have a Southern accent. It's not super strong, but you can certainly hear it. I mean, to Boston of all places seems funny to me.
Well, after Abilene, I went to we married when I finished Abilene, and went to the University of Texas for my doctorate in physics. And we decided that when I finished school, I didn't want to stay in the Bible Belt, or we didn't want to stay in the Bible Belt. We actually, and at that time, the Churches of Christ were starting outreach plantings that they call Exodus movements. And I think the first one is to Brazil, and then one to New York and whatever. But anyway, there was one to actually Burlington, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. And so we were interested in that, and actually became a part of that planting. And in 1968, when I finished graduate school. And the Exodus movements were done in plantings by basically a preacher would decide, I want to do this. In our case, there was 3 preachers on this team. And then they went around to churches in the Bible Belt, recruiting people to move to come a part of that, almost like you're talking about Flagstaff now. And so there were actually 120 people that moved on this planting.
Wow.
They just great-hearted people. I mean, they gave up their careers and just started all over, moving there. And so we actually started a church in Burlington, Massachusetts, with 120 people, with 3 preachers. Had 3 men who soon became elders, deacons, whatever. And so you started with a ready-made church, basically. Now, the problem is that everybody was good-hearted, but nobody knew at all how to start a church. In fact, a lot of the people had never even studied the Bible with anybody. In fact, I'm not sure any of the 3 preachers had ever studied the Bible with anybody. So we went up there totally committed, but totally green, and nobody knew how to do it, and we didn't have any really any models, and so people were also moving from the Southwest or the Bible Belt to Boston was major culture shock for most people, because you had basically the Southwest was conservative culturally. Most wives were stay-at-home wives, but Boston was almost totally Catholic. Mm-hmm. Winters were extreme. Moving from Austin, from the University of Texas, for instance, to Boston at that time, Austin was the lowest cost of living city, over 100,000 people, and Boston was the #1 cost of living in the U.S. And so there was major culture shock in that. And so every summer you'd have about 1/3 of the group that would move back. And so about as much as we grew and baptized people, you had people moving back. And so for 10 years, it stayed about 120 people. Wow. Good-hearted people, but never really doing what we had hoped it would do, right, in terms of really making a major impact in Boston. But that's how we got there. And so it was, we love the people. We were in that church for 15 years. I became an elder in that church. And we built a building in Burlington. In fact, the Boston church now uses some. But it was a great learning experience, but certainly not the impact that we had hoped to have.
Okay, so you were 28. You were born in 1940. Is that right?
Yep.
So
28 years old.
So you're 80. You're 80 now. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, congratulations. That's fantastic. So you went up there 28, and then let's just talk a little bit about that. You asked me to help organize this planting to Flagstaff. What are your thoughts on that? How did you come up with that idea? And what do you feel like is going to make the biggest difference in helping Flagstaff get off the ground? It's been there for a number of years, peaked out. I've heard anywhere between 40 and 50 disciples. What was your thinking in getting that going and then contacting me about that planting in Flagstaff?
Well, obviously, we want to evangelize our states, and Flagstaff, with a small group that has had a couple of false starts, and the Burfords leading it now, which is, tremendous people, but basically up there, good-hearted in retirement and leading a little group. The opportunity to really build a strong group there is obviously what every church wants to do in any state, is to be able to evangelize the state. Mm-hmm. And with you and Pam going to Tucson and building a strong church there, you certainly, you and Pam have the expertise of how to do that. And so partnering with you and we really have a vision then of building a great group in Flagstaff. But primarily, you have the experience and the knowledge of how to do it, and also you have the heart to do that. So you were a no-brainer choice.
Okay.
To do that.
Thank you. Well, Pam and I were excited about the opportunity to plant another church and get that going. I really love the Burfords and inspired by the fact that they went up there in retirement and led that church when most people are just, heading to Boca Raton or something. But Al, there's probably people listening to this broadcast and they're thinking, man, I'd love to go with my husband or with my wife and my family, but I got kids, I've got a house. You've already experienced that yourself going to Boston on a domestic planting. Any encouragement you give to people who are considering going to Flagstaff? Any advice that you would give?
Well, I'd say that a planting is one of the most exciting things you'll ever do. It's just totally unique. Even though we didn't know what we were doing in Burlington with the mainline church, you get really, really close to those people because you're there for one reason. Mm-hmm. Your reason that you're there is to convert people,
right?
And so you've got a group basically of totally committed people. You don't start off with any lukewarm people, and so it's one of the most exciting things that you'll ever do. Yeah. It's because you're there as a team. You're focused, you're working together, and it's just a unique experience.
That's right.
And I've been involved in starting several churches around the world, and to me, there's almost nothing more exciting.
I agree.
Than that initial period of getting a church started going.
Totally agree to that. Al, I absolutely concur. Now, you're 15 years in the Burlington church. Then you join another planting in Boston, same city, totally different results. How did you get connected with the Boston Church of Christ, or it probably had a different name at that time? Can you tell me about how you left the Burlington church and then joined this other church?
Well, again, 15 years of good experience, but also frustration, because when you start off with great dreams of evangelizing a whole area and impacting the city of Boston, and you start off with 120 people, and 15 years later you're still 120 people. You start saying, okay, what's going wrong here, and is this what we want to do the rest of our life? And but in the meantime, we were hearing, and we were also trying to find out, okay, what are other churches doing that are growing? And so anytime we'd hear about a church growing or whatever, we had a number of people that had some impact. But about that time also, campus ministry was getting going. And of course, the Crossroads Church was really starting to grow and make a major impact. Enough so that a number of people were converted in Gainesville at the church there from the Boston area. And so Gloria and I at the time, although I had a career in physics, we were still leading the youth in the Burlington church, and we were the largest Church of Christ in the area. And so when the kids from Crossroads would come home for the holidays, they would come to Burlington. And so we got to know a lot of those people and started hearing about their stories, how they were converted, whatever. And we said, that's what we thought this was going to be all along.
Right.
And so we started, we even went down and visited Crossroads and whatever. But one of the guys that came back, didn't actually come back. He actually went to Harvard Graduate School of Design after he had graduated from University of Florida. And so we sort of adopted him. His name was Bob Mitchell. And so he hung out with us all the time. And he actually got us going on doing soul talks with the teens and things like that. And so he just hung out all the time. And so we said, Bob, what can we do to get you to stay here after you finish Harvard?
Right.
We'll do anything to get you to stay here. He said, well, I have a friend who has actually always wanted to come to Boston and evangelize the campuses, because Boston at that time had 180,000 college students. There was no ministry at all to campus students. He said, if he would come, then I would probably stay. And so I still remember one night when Bob was getting close to finishing Harvard, that we sat, Gloria and I, and he sat in our floor in the living room about 1 o'clock in the morning, praying for this guy that I had never even heard of or met, named Kip McKean. That if Kip McKean would come, then I'd stay. And so we were praying, God, please help Kip McKean come to Boston.
Wow.
And so Kip came and Bob didn't stay. Anyway, so he fell in love and left. But anyway, that was, but also there was another piece to that too. There was a sister church that was 10 miles from us in Lexington called the Lexington Church of Christ, which actually became eventually the Boston Church. And we became good friends with Bob and Pat Gimple because they were part of the Lexington Church. And they had this derelict son named Doug Arthur, who was an all-state basketball player and hated the Church of Christ. And he wanted to go to Duke at that time, which was powerhouse in basketball. He wanted as a walk-on in basketball and make his claim to fame and forget about the Church of Christ.
Right.
And so he did. But he went to there. He went to Duke. But at that time, also, then there was a campus ministry from Crossroads there that got a hold of him and totally turned his life around. He became a disciple. And so when he came back for Christmas, then we linked up and he started helping us over Christmas. And then summertime, we just hung out all the time. And he helped us with the teens and whatever. And of course, that was a major influence for us, but the friendship that developed with Kip. And that was actually about 1978, I think. And Kip, I think, came in 79. But anyway, the Lexington Church was a little bitty church, 30 members. And they were primarily serviced an Air Force base, but the Air Force base closed. And so they were basically a dying church and were considering merging with us in Burlington. And, but Doug came back and asked the leaders, hey, don't do this. Rather, let's try to get this guy. Well, actually, he started off trying to get his campus minister to come from Duke, but he wasn't interested. And he said, I'm not interested, but I know this other guy is named Kip McKean. I think he would like to come. So long story short, the Lexington Church then talked to Kip and Elena, and they convinced them to come to Lexington to start basically a campus ministry. At that time, again, a dying church of, at that time, about 20 members at that time. And so we then in Burlington, Gloria and I just tried to duplicate everything they did and for 3 years. But the problem was nobody wanted to do it in Burlington. So we'd go to the retreats, we'd go to their devos, we'd go to their whatever. And then in 1983, I still remember February of 1983, Bob and Pat, we hung out with Bob and Pat from time to time. We were good friends. They had us over for dinner. And at that time, Bob and Pat said, Al and Gloria, we have a proposal for you. We'd like for you to give up your career in physics, go into full-time ministry, and join us in Burlington, in Boston. And that totally just blew our minds, because I had a minor in Bible anyway. And the main reason I hadn't gone in the ministry is because I didn't like the way that Church of Christ treated preachers. But so I decided to become self-supporting. That's the reason I went into physics. And but anyway, we struggled with that for 3 months. Got a lot of advice, prayed about it, whatever. That was in February, and in May we decided that okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to give up my career. And so I went in the research center and made the announcement that I was going to leaving physics and going in the ministry, which everybody thought I was totally insane. And that was in May of 1983. And in July of 19, but also I was not going to do it until September. So I was going to stay with the research center until September. But in July, the other research center called the research center together and said, we're closing the research center. So basically, I was the only person with a job. but also they said, Al, if you will stay on and help close down the research center until November, we'll give you a significant bonus, and you actually only have to be here about 3 hours a day. So basically, by September, I'd started basically in a full-time ministry, and they gave me enough of a bonus to put Stacy, our oldest, through the first year of college. So we just felt like God's exclamation point on that whole thing.
Wow.
But it was a huge deal announcing in May that we were leaving the Burlington church, going to at that time the Lexington church. Because we had actually converted a number of those people, and I was an elder there, and it really broke people's hearts, and it was one of the hardest decisions we ever made. Of course, 3 months later, I would have had to leave Boston anyway because the research center had closed.
Right.
But anyway, that was sort of our transition.
That's amazing. Now, let's just talk about, you're 43. You've got a kid who's just entering college. You've got 3 more girls that are younger than that.
Two others.
I mean, talk about pressure.
We have 3 girls.
You've got 3 girls. Okay, so you got 3 girls, one about to go to college. You make a major career shift. That must have been frightening. I can't imagine.
Well, yeah, one of my questions, of course, the Sperry job, the research center, I love that job. I love the career. I've been there 15 years. I just got a month's vacation and great retirement. And it was a great job. And so one of the questions I asked Bob about going into ministry, he said, okay, tell me about retirement.
Right.
And he said, "Oh, we have a great retirement program. When you die, you go to heaven." So
he was upfront about it. But Al, do you ever?
And that was the retirement.
That's right. Do you ever regret that decision? When looking back on that, how do you view it now? Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Oh man, the third best decision ever made. First was becoming a Christian. Second was marrying Gloria, and third was that decision to go to join and move into the Boston church. At that time, the Lexington church.
And why is that?
It was a time that I've never seen so many miracles in my life of changed lives, whatever. Of course, we were at that time still very much a part of the Church of Christ. The change didn't happen until a number of years later. But we, of course, thought we had to have a building. Any legitimate church had to have a building, and the Lexington church had its own little building, but only seated 100 people. And so they outgrew that in the first 6 months and started meeting in the Arlington Baptist Church, and that was seat 600. Outgrew that pretty quickly and started having dual services there and the Arlington High School, which was a block down the street. But also it really started looking for a building that we could buy, and found the perfect building in Lexington. In Concord, historic old church building, and started negotiating on it, and just about ready to close the deal, and the church burned to the ground.
Oh my gosh.
And everybody was totally depressed, felt like Satan had won that battle and whatever. And so by that time, we also started looking harder, and actually found in Boston an old Baptist church that would seat 1,200 people. And we actually bought it. And 3 weeks later, it burned to the ground.
Wow.
And not only that, because we obviously had scraped together all the money we had for a down payment, but because the reasons for the fire were suspicious, insurance would not pay immediately, or they would pay, but they would only pay book value, not what the building was worth. And we had a tremendous deal. And so we were actually in arbitration with over insurance for 3 years, which means it tied up all of our down payment, which means that we couldn't look for another building to buy. And so we could not buy a building. And so by that time, we were grown enough, we moved into the Opera House in downtown Boston. But after 3 years, we won the arbitration and got enough money in the settlement to actually fund 6 mission teams.
Oh my gosh.
So, and by then we said, you know what, with our growth, the rate of our growth, we can't have a building because you keep outgrowing the buildings. And so at that point in time, that's where initially we decided as a movement, we put our money in people rather than buildings. I mean, obviously we now get buildings if it makes sense, but by and large, it shaped our philosophy that our contribution will primarily go toward people and not maintenance of buildings and mortgages.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's been a question I've had for many years, is where did all the money come from to send out so many church plantings? I mean, how many church plantings went out from Boston, let's say from 79 to 90? How many plantings were sent out from that church?
Probably, well, I think there have been 40 total to date. I think there were about 20 by then.
That's amazing.
25.
So that arbitration win enabled you to send out 6 church plantings. Where else was the money coming from, Al? I mean, you're starting in 79 with 30 people. Then in the next 10 years or so, you've got 20 plantings sent out. I go, how did it happen? I mean, of course, God, but where's that money coming from?
Well, we started, first of all, we'd fund teams with what we call the Hawaiian Punch Can Ministry. And that was that we got people to get Hawaiian punch cans and keep them in their homes and put all their loose change and the dollars into it and whatever. It's sort of the beginning of special mission contributions. But we very soon realized that wasn't going to raise enough money. And so we started having a special mission contribution each year. And as we grew, those churches would also kick in. I still remember, I forget exactly what year it was, but the Churches of Christ had never had $1 million contribution for missions. And so we decided we're going to break $1 million for missions. And so one of our mission seminars then, I forget how far, maybe it was, I don't know, about 1985, 86. I can't remember the year, but we broke $1 million in special mission contribution. And so that was our primary method of funding mission teams, was our mission contribution, which at that time, our goal primarily was, most of our mission contributions were 20 times our weekly contribution. And so people would sell, people would sell their wedding rings, they would sell their houses, they would sell, I remember Lynn Green at the time sold a racehorse, whatever. I mean, people just sacrificed because they believed in winning the world.
That's awesome. That's great. So you were there at the beginning. For the first 4 years, you were at a church nearby.
3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Okay, so let's talk a little bit of you're in a traditional, of course, they're all traditional churches, but you're in the Burlington church that had been a planting. What was different, Al? What did you see there in Kip? Okay, Kip's become, very controversial in later times, but it was really special what was happening there. What did you see in him? What did you see in the church that was different than your experience? Looking back, what what stands out to you?
There was a drive and a dream to win the world. It wasn't just to have a growing church, but it was basically to win the world. It was very early on. Actually, Kip came up with the idea of doing pillar churches, and the idea was to go to major metropolitan areas in the world, for instance, Paris, or just all the major cities, London, Paris, Bombay, Hong Kong, whatever, and start a pillar church there, and from there be able to evangelize that whole country. And so that became the plan. And it's very interesting. Donald, we very soon caught the attention of a lot of church growth experts. For instance, Donald McGavran was at that time the sort of called the father of church growth. One of his quotes was that he told us, he said, "You're the only group that I've ever known of that has a viable plan to win the world." And so, I mean, it was not just, we're not just going to convert Boston. We're going to try to convert the world. And that just fueled people. I mean, that dream drove people.
Right. That's amazing. Inspiring. Looking back, what do you feel like you could apply today from things that were going on back then? You know, what are three, you've talked about the vision for the world. What are three things that you would attribute that rapid growth to? I mean, how like starting from 30, where was it at in 1989, 10 years later? How big was the church in Boston?
From 1979 to 1990, basically 11 years, the church grew at 66% a year.
Oh my gosh.
For 10 years. That means it doubled every year and a half. So that means that you're starting with the 30 would-be's. I mean, in 10 years, you were over. I mean, this counts the plantings too. You were well over 20,000 members. So I mean, literally, it's a straight line growth of about 66% a year.
Okay,
and
so
there are many reasons for it. Number one, you had the enthusiasm of youth. The median age of the Boston church for those 10 years was still in the 20s. And I was, when I became a part of the Boston church, or the time the Lexington church, at 43 years old, I was the oldest person in the church. And the people still tell me now that we thought you were really old. Now they're that old. But I was ancient at 43 years old. And so it was a youth movement. And of course you had the enthusiasm of youth. Of course, you had a lot of mistakes you made as youth too.
Sure.
We at 43, I had not. There's a lot of similarity, church growth and family growth, and nobody in the church had the experience of having a second generation family, that the lessons you learn from that.
Right.
And so we made a lot of fundamental mistakes that we had to do over again. We'd do very different. But it was, I think a lot of it too was, I think it was God just had his hand on it. I think that God has had his hand at certain times in history.
Yeah.
For certain things to happen, revival movements, whatever. And I think this was absolutely one of them. It was on the heels of the Vietnam War, and you had youth were looking for purpose in life.
Yeah.
What do I want to do? What do I want to make a difference? I don't want to fight war. That's where the Peace Corps was getting going then. A lot of youth was involved in trying to figure out, how can I make my life count? rather than just how can I make a lot of money.
If there are church leaders listening to this, and if a person wanted to see their church growing today, what could they adopt from that time? I mean, clearly God's blessing, his hand, his power was resting on the church and the churches at that time. But what could they adopt from that time that you feel like would make the biggest difference today?
Ooh, there's a lot of things there. Number one, you got to have a dreamer. You got to have big dreams. You can't just not status quo. I mean, you don't want to say, hey, we want a church that grows at 5% a year.
Right.
You're never going to get there. I mean, you got to have a big dreamer. And then you got to have a core group of people that buy into that dream. And of course, in that involved, you got to have some talent involved in it too. But I think also you've got to have, to really make an impact, you got to have youth. You need the basic older people. Obviously, it's very important. I mean, it's sort of the backbone of the church. But you got to have the enthusiasm and then basically naivete, in a good sense,
right.
of youth.
Right.
That just don't know you can't do it.
That's powerful.
And great. You got to also have the basic total commitment. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're just going to totally buy in and be given over totally to God, no holes barred. Mm-hmm. You can't tolerate lukewarmness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that. What did you see in Kip that was outstanding or exceptional? What made him different than the average preacher at that time?
Well, I think that he wasn't too unusual from the other preachers that came out of Crossroads. I mean, they came out of Crossroads trained as preachers, and I think about 40 of them were trained, and a number of them eventually ended up in Boston. But I think they caught from that Crossroads experience the dream that this can really happen. Mm-hmm. God can use us to make an impact on the world.
That's awesome.
And Kip came in with that dream. That absolutely, his dream was initially for what drew him to Boston was the campuses and the 180,000 college students and whatever.
Wow.
But also the dream that he had, which was unique at that time to really make an impact on the world. Because at that time, you had to have a lot of faith to think you're going to make an impact on the world when you look at the world at that time. Because number one, you had the Iron Curtain, you had the bamboo curtain, you had Russia was totally closed, China was totally closed, you had apartheid in South Africa, you had the Middle East war, you had everywhere you look, you had civil war in Latin America. Everywhere you looked in the world, you'd say you can't make an impact there.
Right.
And yet God opened the door in every one of those places.
Isn't that amazing? It's like the
timing.
timing.
One of the most amazing places of all was Russia, with Andy and Tammy and the team that went in there. I mean, they went in before the coup, when you couldn't do anything legally. You couldn't even bring in Bibles legally. And they go in there, and then there's the coup, and suddenly it's just wide open. And in the first year, they baptized over 800.
It's a miracle. It's totally the power of God. So, Al, you and Gloria obviously had a remarkable marriage. How many years were you married?
56.
56. Okay. And what practices were you doing that kept your love so strong? I mean, it's clearly you wrote a book on it. I mean, you guys always seem so happy together. What were you doing behind the scenes that really made the difference to keep your love going?
Well, I mean, first of all, like I said, we were best friends. We just loved hanging out together. I mean, we spent as much time as we could together. One of the things that we decided that we would do from the very start of our marriage was that we decided we would pray together every day. And so we did that except when we were apart, we literally did that every day of our life. And we call that the glue of our marriage. Because it was always the two of us and God together. And we regularly would spend special time together. For instance, one of the things we really advise marriage to do is to every 3 months at least get away together, just the two of you, for at least a night. Because it does two things. Number one, it rejuvenates your relationship, having that special time together, but also it gives you that to look forward to. When you know that you're going to be doing that in a few weeks, you got that to look forward to. Right. That when you're going through some hard times or whatever, then we can just think another 6 weeks, we're going to be together, whatever. So, we always did special things for each other. We always tried to surprise each other with things. And it was just, we just wanted to keep our relationship fresh, because we saw so many marriages that we just didn't want to be like.
Right.
We'd go out and eat and look at a couple and say, we don't want to be like them.
No, right.
Whatever. So it was just always a goal of, we're going to work to make this really a great, loving relationship that we super enjoy. I still regret. All the couples that are getting in trouble over COVID, all the time together. I just don't understand. I wish I had Gloria during COVID.
Right.
We would have loved having that much time together.
Right. Exactly. Not only was your marriage strong, but your kids, all three of your girls, grew up to be strong disciples. What were you doing? I mean, how did that happen? Of course, you can't guarantee it, but what practices were you doing that you wish more families would put into practice?
Well, it's something that we firmly believed at the time and still believe is meal times together. We had really special, fun dinner times together, and we tried to do. Of course, especially as the kids got older and everybody started having their own activities and whatever, we would still try to have the majority of our nights together. We'd have a meal together, and it was at that time we didn't have cell phones, but if we had, it would have been no cell phones. We had no TV, no telephone, no whatever. And nobody leaves the table until everybody leaves the table. And we'd always we would do things like we had a memory verse of the week that everybody memorized, and it was cumulative, and everybody could ask everybody else, okay, what was this verse and whatever. It's interesting. Still today, we can still quote some of those verses we memorized together.
Wow.
And then we would have one family night together. I say night, it wasn't always a night. It might be just an hour together, but it was a time when, for instance, the girls would fix the meals. They would plan the meals. We'd have some games, whatever, but it was just a special, and the girl, we'd take turns planning it. Who wanted to plan the family night this week or next week or whatever. And so we just, there were a lot of great memories, and we would spend time getting away with them together. And Gloria and I both would try to have discipling times with them. I'd take the girls out for a Coke, or we'd talk, and the Gloria would spend time with the girls and whatever. So we try to make each one of them feel special. And they were all, they were a good age. Each of them are 3 years apart. And so there was not a lot of competition with each other. That was an advantage. And they all liked each other.
Yeah.
And still do. It's, but it was just, it was a real blessing to us. It was, and to be truthful, all of our girls were, none of them was rebellious. Mm-hmm. And of course, kids, they'll have their own nature, and you can't change that. But our girls were very much wanted to be taught and wanted to be loved and wanted to be a part of the family, and that God used that.
Right. Al, one of the most common questions I get to the podcast is, how do you do ministry and raise kids at the same time? Any advice?
Yeah, well, each situation is different, but I think again, what we say is you got to get your priorities straight. Is ministry number one takes a back seat to your relationship with God. It takes a back seat to your relationship with your mate. It takes a back seat to your relationship with your kids. It's always got to be after all those things. And we tried hard to make our kids feel like they were more important than the ministry was. Although, I mean, obviously there were times we couldn't be with them and whatever, but we tried very hard to make them feel like, you know, you are more important than the ministry, or for that matter, for anybody else, more important than your job or more important than whatever. But it was always God first, your mate second, your kids third, and we tried very hard to make our kids feel that, and that they felt that.
That's great. I know this is a sensitive subject, Al, but can you tell me a little bit about how you and Gloria discovered that she was sick? Can you tell me how that came up and the development of her illness?
Yeah, we had just come back. This is 2012, and we had just gotten back from time in Tokyo and Seoul and I think Manila and Hong Kong. We'd been gone working with the churches for probably a month, and we were on our way back to go to San Antonio for the conference in 2012, and we stopped in Virginia. Our oldest daughter Stacy and Andy lived there, and so we stopped there for several days. The whole family was going to San Antonio, but we stopped there for a few days. And when we flew a lot, Gloria's ankles would usually swell up, and then after we landed, they go back down. But this particular time, her ankles were still swollen, and after a couple of days. And Stacy said, "You need to go to a podiatrist and see what he says about that." And so she went to a podiatrist there in Virginia, and the podiatrist said, "Okay, we need to take a scan and see, because first thing we want to look for is clots, to make sure that you don't have a clot." And they took a scan and didn't find anything, but he said, I'm gonna look a little bit higher. And so they did another scan and noticed that there was fluid around the lung. That obviously was very concerning. And they said at that time, okay, there's three things that could probably be due to. One is an infection. Two is a heart problem, or three is cancer. And so Gloria and I decided it would definitely be an infection from travel.
Right.
So anyway, we then went on to San Antonio for the conference. And while we were in Texas for the conference, we got a call from the hospital there in Virginia saying, "Bad news. The test shows that it's cancer, and we don't know what kind of cancer it is, but you need to go back to LA as soon as you can and get that tested and find out what's going on." And so we were there. The whole family was there in San Antonio, and then we went back to UCLA, and they did further testing and found out that it was uterine cancer. And so began. She had a total hysterectomy then, and began chemo for 6 months, I think. at which time she was then in total remission. So, I mean, very, very good news. And then we moved to Phoenix, and they continued to monitor her. But then after a couple of years, it had reoccurred, and so she then went in chemo again, and this time did not go into remission, but the counts went back down, and then the counts went back up, and then she went into chemo again, and that was the last round. But it finally, and she went into some experimental treatment. But finally, the last word was that it transitioned into her brain. And so the doctor said, we can continue the treatment, or you can go on hospice, your choice. And so we said, if it's going to the brain, we don't want to continue this. And we went hospice, and she was gone within 2 weeks after that. Wow. So we were very thankful that she never really had a lot of things that could have happened once cancer goes to the brain. She never had any of that. God spared her from that.
Wow.
So, and we were able to have all the family there for her last days, and she was totally aware, and we just had a great time together as a family, and a lot of our friends came, and the girls and I have all said if we could have designed her last days, we could not have come up with as good a plan as God came up with. It was just almost the perfect ending to a great life. I mean, obviously, I'd still like to have her around, but it was compared to what a lot of people go through at the end. I'm just so thankful that God took her the way that He took her.
I know that your whole family was around. What made it special? I mean, what made it as unique as you explained there?
Well, I mean, it was she still had her sense of humor. She knew she was going to be with God, and so that was exciting to her. And the kids, the grandkids, everybody was hanging out at the house here. And there was singing, there was joking, there were tears, there were whatever. I mean, it was just a very special last week that the whole family had together. And you would have to know Gloria to know her sense of humor. I mean, she never lost her. In fact, her humor almost accelerated toward the end. And nobody knew how long we really had with her. And one time we had she had a hospital bed in the living room. And so it was sort of the center of activity. And for those last 9 days, actually. But about 3 days before I lost her, she called me over the bed, and she said, "Al, I think this may be it. I may have to say goodbye." And then she said, "But I don't know because I've never done this before."
Oh my gosh! And what was the date of her passing?
July 14th, 2 years ago.
2018, July 14th. Was she conscious till the very end, or like how? Did she slip into a coma?
Well, she was conscious till the last day. Then she went into lost consciousness.
Okay.
For the last few hours.
I heard from somebody that you told her when she got sick that you would never miss a doctor's appointment with her. Is that true?
I don't know if I told her that. I did that, and I mean she knew that. I mean that was the advantage. I mean my word by then, I was time she got cancer, I was already 75, and so it was not like I had an 8-hour a day job that I had to be at. And so it was, in that sense, a blessing. I had the flexibility that I didn't have to say I'm taking off work here or I'm doing this or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
I'm still in the ministry,
Right.
but with all that flexibility, and I was always with her at chemo and doctor's appointments and whatever. I mean, number one, I just wanted to be with her because I didn't know how long I had with her. But
Right.
secondly, I didn't want her to do that by herself.
Well, how did you and how do you cope with her passing, Al? I mean, what you're experiencing, it's happening with increasing regularity as our movement gets older.
Sure.
How have you learned to cope with this?
I don't think you learn to cope with it. You don't ever get over it. I mean, it's still. I'm lonely. I'm living by myself. I'm 5 minutes from one of our daughters, Steve and Carrie. But it's just. I mean, I've got pictures of her all over the place. I mean, I just miss her. And there's no way that your partner for 56 years that you're just going to get over. Mm. And of course, at my age, I'm not about to remarry. Right. I mean, maybe if I was in my 50s or something like that, but it wouldn't even be fair to think about marrying somebody else because nobody could hold a candle to her.
Right.
I mean, she was the joy of my life.
Yeah.
So.
What?
But anyway, everybody grieves in different ways, and I think that there's just no one way to grieve. But I don't. People can say, "How did you get over it?" I never got over it. I never will get over it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lonely without her.
Yeah. What has helped you that might help others who are losing or have lost loved ones?
Well, I think you got to number one, not retreat from the world. I think diving in and staying busy and having close friends and people that you can be real with, people you can laugh with and cry with. And I mean, my girls, bless their hearts, have circled the wagons around me, are always checking on me and whatever. Only one lives here. One lives in California and one in Virginia and one here. But I mean, it's just sometimes they're like mother hens, and saying, okay, how you, and Carrie, the one that lives here, is the most emotional one, and I'm the least emotional one of all the five of us, and she'll always say, okay, Dad, how you feeling? I say, Carrie, I don't know how I'm feeling. Back off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you are a scientific person. You have a doctorate in physics. You seem, you strike me as a very self-composed person, and I just can't imagine the kind of depth of loss. How did you go back to just being single? Like, how do you spend your time now? Like, how do you make that massive adjustment to being, by yourself?
Well, I think, again, I think each person is different, but I stay very busy. I'm still basically a full-time minister. So, I mean, I'm still very involved with people. I think that it would be deadly for me to retreat into become a hermit.
I see. Got it.
So I'm very involved with people and try to be very open with people.
Yeah. Well, Al, I really appreciate the time. Any final words that you'd like to share with people who want to make their life count for God? You've spent 80 years devoted to God, most of those years, obviously. Any advice that you'd like to pass on to people that would like to follow in the footsteps of total commitment to God?
Well, I think that first of all, you got to decide, I'm going to be totally committed to God. I mean, whatever He wants, that's what I'm going to do. But then I think you got to surround yourself and find people that think like you think, that you can dream together, and you can call each other higher, and you can challenge each other. To me, I think that's so very important. I mean, obviously, I had that in one sense built in with Gloria, and then all three of our girls caught that dream. But even when you don't have that, you can have friends that have similar type dreams and can call each other higher. And I think that's so much of what we need in the church now. I think we've got to get back to the basics of discipling relationships, or prayer partners, whatever you want to call them, people that think like you do, who know you're good, bad, and ugly, and call you higher and you call them higher.
Amen. That's great. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the time again, Al, and respect you so highly. And I know you're respected around the world. Thank you for your commitment to God, your love, your example. It's interesting to me that you were an old timer back in the Boston days. You at 43, you were the old person.
I was old.
And you're still serving God. That's what's so inspiring. And I hope to be as fired up as you are when I'm your age. And I want to thank you today for listening to the Rob Skinner podcast. It's been a great time together, and I hope that you're enjoying this time that we are spending time together every week. I'd like to ask you to keep praying for the church planting in Flagstaff in the summer of 2021. My goal is to inspire you to make this life count, to live a no regrets life, and to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.